All right, welcome to another episode of the Athletic Transformation Project podcast. I'm here with Beau Chavez, the owner-operator of UbrZati, a speed-based performance facility here in Melbourne, Florida that has some very unique training methods with some high-speed treadmills, as well as some other interesting protocols. I'm very excited to chop up with him today. So, Beau, welcome to the podcast,
Welcome,
man.
man. I absolutely love being here. Glad you
right.
came down.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me. So why don't we just start with like what UbrZati is, like kind of where this came from? Again, you guys have some unique methodologies, some unique protocols, kind of how we got to where we are today.
So UbrZati is a project of myself, Dario Kolovic, who's another business partner of ours, and Tim Stockton. UbrZati actually means, Dario's Croatian, and UbrZati means speed acceleration in Croatian. So that's where technically the name came from. Because we're always going to ask that question. What is UbrZati, right? And then Tim is a marketing genius, and developed the Z, and the Z looks like a, if you look at the Z, it looks like a dorsiflexed ankle or a flexed knee, and what we call triple flexion. But the program actually started a long time ago. Started developing in about '99 in Alaska.
Yeah. Tell me about that. What were you doing in Alaska? It's a little bit.
We were just talking about 5 minutes ago about I went to school in Indiana, and I just didn't like school, and I didn't want to get my master's degree, and I wanted to go and do something unique and exciting. And so just gotten married, and so we decided to load up a truck and move to Alaska, and got to Alaska and had my degree, and I got into a company that was it was just more of like a regular gym. So got into the gym setting, doing personal training, and started realizing early on that I wanted to train athletes. And so my goal was to, get athletes, and it goes back to, you were just talking about Ben, my 13-year-old self. If I could go back with the knowledge that I had at that time, when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, I'd have been twice the athlete. So I said, you know what? I want to be able to allow athletes to get stronger, to get faster, to move better, because I didn't have anybody to help me, because I was born and raised in northern New Mexico, and at that point in time there was nobody. Right? I was going to do some bench press or whatever, and nobody knew what speed development was. Nobody knew anything like that. So I took the route of saying, hey, let's figure out a way to where I can develop something and take a method of speed development and give it to kids who are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, so that they have an opportunity to go into a higher level, or to just do something that they never thought they were capable of doing. So started with a company called Acceleration, and Acceleration was using these devices called the high performance, at that time, high speed treadmills, and now we're calling them high performance because they're more than just speed. And so I started working with them, and just saw, man, I was thinking, this is an amazing way. And I started doing it personally. And when I started doing it personally, I turned into the athlete at 24 that I needed to be when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, right? And I'm like, man, this is amazing stuff. And so I started kind of diving into it, and met a gentleman by the name of John Frappier, who had developed the high-performance treadmill. And that's where really the protocols and the adaptation of increasing, enhancing, someone's speed started. And that started in about '99, and just started developing it over the past 10 years, leading into developing our own treadmill, and that's where we are now. And so, long story short is, 25 years later, here we are in Florida, and I hooked up with Dario, who was a good friend of mine, and then, got involved with Tim, and we started an amazing relationship, and we're all very different in all very different ways. We all have our strengths, and we bring to the table. And so we sat down one day and said, hey, how can we take this to the masses and do it in the right way? So we said, hey, let's develop UbrZati, and let's build and design our own high-performance treadmill. Let's implement the protocols, right? Because that's really what the treadmill is about. The treadmill is just like a tool, right? But you can only use a tool if you know how to use it correctly, right? So now we know how to use the high-performance treadmills correctly with our protocols, and so we developed UbrZati about 2 years ago. The concept came about 2 years ago, and then started developing the Z Tread, is what we're calling it, and now the Z Tread now is almost out and ready to roll. And so, long story short, here we are today, man. That's UbrZati.
I love it. You've definitely gone from about as opposite as you can from Alaska down to coastal Florida and stuff like
that. It's been a long time coming, but you go, basically west all the way to east. And so Yeah, I love being here, and the cool thing about it is it's the people that are involved in this whole project that are making the difference. It really is.
That's awesome. And I do really like that idea of what you talked about of just trying to create that environment for that younger athlete who, like, if they have the ambition to go and do whatever it is to go
Absolutely.
pursue the best that they can be, to go pursue athletics, just to have an environment where they can go and try and pursue that. Not something that you had for yourself growing up. I love that
And
motivation.
that's where the passion comes from. Is pro athletes are great to work with. I love working with pro athletes, but when you have a passion for we go back to these younger kids that are 13, 14, 15 years old, and right, that they may not be a Division I athlete, they may not even be a Division II athlete, right? They might not even be a Division III athlete, but if we can develop them to do something that they were never going to be able to capable to do, but to instill that in them and give them an opportunity to get better. Okay, maybe we make a D3 kid a D2, a D2, a D1, or take a kid who's not going to go on to college and play athletics, but has the greatest experience at the high school level, right? And that's what we want, because that's what we want to develop. Pro athletes, I always say pro athletes, Division I athletes are usually identifiable at about age 5 or 6, right? They're like, hey, that kid is special, right? They move different, they're bigger, they're genetically more gifted, right? But if we can take somebody, and I always use myself as an example, it goes back to what you're saying about Ben, right? If I could go back to my, 16-year-old self, right? If I could go back to my, 14, 15-year-old self and have somebody like me to instill the confidence and train me like I was, that I was capable of training, I just didn't have it, right?
Yeah.
And have that person develop me, I think my athletic career would have been twice of what it was,
Yeah,
right?
just
And
help
so
that person overachieve.
exactly,
Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. That's the whole point. Like I said, I love the collegiate, the higher level collegiate kids and the pro guys. But at the end of the day, is if we can truly develop these young kids and give them something that they weren't capable of, say, having if it wasn't for something that we did here with them, or that you do with them, however it may be, then that's what we want. That's our passion.
Yeah, and even just building like those character traits and
Absolutely.
discipline, all those things. That's that's
for
awesome.
sure,
That's what it's all about. It can be bigger than the sport sometimes.
Exactly, man.
Like, yeah.
That's exactly right.
So tell me about the treadmills, man, because that's one of like the biggest, like, I guess, unique factors you guys have going on
Sure.
here. It sounds like something that you've found like for all the way back in '99, like something that you've
Right.
been, like, when you first got introduced to it. What
Right.
was it that kind of grabbed your attention about it when you first came across it, and then maybe what's that evolution looked like into what we have now?
So when I first started doing it, and it was actually about '98 is when I was really introduced to it, and I got on it myself, and I was like, man, right? And what it is it pushes you beyond a point that you normally wouldn't push yourself if you were on the ground, right? It overrides what we call certain neural patterns, right? It's basically telling your brain to tell your body, to tell your muscles to fire at a higher rate of force, and your body and your mind begins to understand that. That's the cool thing about the treads, right? And so when I started doing it, right, and I turned into the athlete that I wanted to be, 4 years prior to that, right? There's something to it. But once again, right, if you don't know how to progress it the right way, it's just like anything else, right? If you don't know how to use the tool, right, you're going to, one, abuse it, okay, and something bad's going to happen, or two, you're just not going to use it at all. You're going to be like, well, I just don't know what to do, and so it either sits there, or you don't use it to its full potential.
Gosh, so would you say that, like, it sounds like that, like, overspeed concept? Is that one of the
ideas? Overspeed is one concept of it, right? But when we dive into the protocols and how I developed the protocols, the one thing that I began learning through experience was, okay, yeah, does overspeed work? Absolutely, overspeed works, right? But it's really only about 1% to 2% of what we actually do on the treads, okay? And to this day, when I go and I speak and we implement the program, is the one thing I try to stress. I said, and I sit in front of, it's the first thing I say is, if you don't, right, learn anything, right, in these next 2 or 3 days during this education, the one thing I really want you to understand is it's not the speed of the belt, it's the incline of the treadmill that forces an athlete to get into certain biomechanical positions that will increase their speed on the ground. Right? What I found out a long time ago, and this is through almost losing my business early on, was I was doing overspeed training, but I was doing overspeed training in an off-weighted situation.
What do you mean?
Right? So Infinite Wisdom, right, is I saw a program, and they were doing overspeed, and they had a harness attached to them, right? Which is technically how we developed the harness for these treads. But what they were doing, they were actually off-weighting people.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
In the hopes of taking off some body weight so that when they get on the belt, right, and they overturn and it becomes quote unquote overspeed. We know overspeed works, but what I started finding is as these higher level athletes get into say 19, 20, 21, 22 miles per hour, and you put them in an off weighted situation, okay, and you're running at say 22 miles an hour, right, and their foot hits that belt and that belt pulls them back, right, and they go into the flight phase, and the weight is actually pulling, your body detects that. The body doesn't like that. What's the first thing the body wants to do? It wants to protect itself, right? And if you're not used to that greater stretch that belt's getting on you, the first thing the body wants to do is slow down. And in an off-weighted position, it's even worse because you're being pulled up, right? So then you begin to overstride. And at 21, 22, 23 miles per hour, if you overstride, the first thing the body does, instead of high knee, dorsal flexed ankle, and then putting it straight down up underneath your support system, you go out in front of you. And at 22 miles an hour, if you put your heel down out in front of you, the first thing that goes, hamstring. So I started popping hamstrings, right? Not just like, I'm just kind of like tweaking a little bit. I'm like these kids were getting shot, right? They'd get on that treadmill, man, and they would start overstriding, and automatically, boom, there goes a hamstring, right? And so a guy like me, right, begins to give the treadmill a bad name, right? Because that's the thing, right? It's not the same. It's different. It hurts people, blah, blah, blah. Well, I learned that early on, that if you do that, right, you have to change it. And so I made a phone call to John Frappier. And I said, hey, man, are you seeing these kind of things? He goes, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm doing some overspeed stuff. He goes, well, overspeed works. You know that. I'm like, yeah. He goes, are you doing it at low incline? I said, I'm doing it at low incline about 1 to 2%, sometimes 0. He said, what else are you doing? Right. So he's picking my brain, right? What's going on, right? Because we're not pulling hamstrings, right? If you're following a correct system, we don't pull hamstrings. And so, well, I'm doing some off weighting. He's like, well, how much are you off weighting him? I said, I don't know, 15 pounds. And he said, and it's funny, is he had a North Dakota accent. He's like, oh, Beau. He goes, even at 5 pounds, Beau, he goes, that body detects that, right? He says the biomotor pattern will change, and the first thing they're going to do is overstride. And the first thing you do at an overstride position on a high performance treadmill, high speed, at high speeds, is you pop the hamstring, right? So does overspeed training work? Absolutely, but it has to be done right. And so I'm like, okay, no more off weighting. How can we, but I also wanted to be able to support the athlete if something happens, right? So we developed a harness to where when they hit foot contact, they're full body weight. Okay, we're still over speeding them, okay, but they're still full body weight. Now the harness becomes more of a support system.
Interesting.
Okay, but here's the caveat is you can't overspeed somebody if they don't know how to run that specific speed. Does that make sense? That's where everybody goes wrong, right? Is okay, I want my athlete to run 20 miles per hour, okay? And the thought process is, okay, I have a high speed treadmill. All right, we're going to get them on there, say they're a high level athlete. I want them to be able to hit, say, 21, 22 miles per hour on actual ground and have actual 22-mile ground speed. We'll put them on the treadmill, right? We'll try to get them faster. So what are we going to do? We'll start at 20, 21, 22 miles per hour.
Just throw them into it.
Just throw them into it, right? Throw them into it, right? But the thing is if your body doesn't have, right, the neurological capacity to fire the muscles at that high rate of force, they're just not going to get it, right? So they get on at 20 miles an hour. If they can't handle 20 miles per hour, right, they just can't handle it. It's like I tell a coach, I said, okay, if you want a kid to squat 500 pounds, right, do you put them under the bar at 500 pounds? No, right? You have to periodize it to get progression, right? So what's the point of the protocols? Progression. Okay, so when we're talking about overspeed, we don't do any kind of quote unquote lower incline, higher speed until in our progression on the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th weeks. Right? It's not like, okay, we're gonna do high speed week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, right? And hoping that that biomotor pattern, they pick up that speed. No, we use the incline, okay, to force the athlete, or more importantly, to force the brain, to tell the muscles to fire the proper sequence of the muscles using the incline, right, to enhance stride frequency and stride length by increasing triple flexion and triple extension, right? We do that for 2 to 3 weeks. Then, right, once they have those parameters down, then we'll get them at a higher rate of force or a higher speed at a moderate incline, right, at a little bit higher speed on the tread. So as an example, okay, if we take a 17-year-old varsity high school athlete, right, assess them, do everything we do. So from weeks 1 to week 2, within the protocols and the progression, right, we dose them with the incline, right? The incline's forcing them to get into certain parameters that normally they wouldn't get in on the ground. Okay, and we can get into that triple flexion, triple extension, dorsal flexion, which I know you're big on. Dorsal flexion at the ankle and dorsal flexion at the big toe. And nobody ever talks about the big toe, but it takes those 2 weeks, right? Then, okay, we bring them down to a lower incline, say week 3, okay? And then at that point, we can do an overspeed, right? But they'll start at, say, 12, 13, 14, 15 miles per hour. That's week 3, okay? Then we dose them again for another 2 weeks with the incline. Okay, and then on week 5 or week 6, right, now they're doing 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe 16, 17 miles per hour. Then dose them again for 3 weeks with the incline, with different holds, I mean, there's a lot of things we do on the tread. It's not just get on and run.
Yeah.
So then at the 7th to 8th week, now they're going 16, 17, 18, maybe 19 miles per hour. Okay, but we dose them over a periodized approach to get them to, okay, quote unquote, 20 miles per hour, if that's what they want to run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's not just get them on and say, okay, let's see how fast you can run today.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting because like I haven't trained over speed like consistently or anything like that, but I've just dabbled with like just have a hill outside of my house in Gainesville and just running downhill.
Right.
It's like one of I know the original ways to do and it does feel having any background, it feels very strange. Like you're just trying to like road runner, like it doesn't feel natural.
It doesn't feel natural, and it's not, and it's really not natural. So I've done so many shows and been doing this for so long that I've heard, everything is like, well, we can just, I've had some old school coaches like, we'll just go outside and we'll run them downhill, or we'll go outside and we'll run them uphill, right? If you're talking about incline, that's great. I understand that. So here's a couple caveats. So downhill running, all right? If the hill is greater than 5%, okay, your body automatically will go into an overstride sequence.
And I can feel,
right? You're kind of like when you're a little kid, right? I remember I grew up in the mountains, right? And we'd be like, all right, let's run downhill. Well, you run downhill, right? And you start going downhill. Is it overspeed? Right? Is your brain saying, holy shit, man, I've got to get going, right?
You're almost and like playing defense.
So you're right, exactly, right? And you start, your stride changes drastically. But if you're in an actual controlled situation and you want to, do an overspeed and you want to do downhill, that's fine. But anything greater, and I'm telling you right now, anything greater than 5% of inclination downhill will change your parameters. And the first thing you do is overstride.
Yeah.
Your body detects it, right? And what did I tell you? Your body detects something that doesn't like, it goes into survival mode, so it wants to slow down.
Yeah,
okay.
You can definitely feel that, like thinking back on it for sure. It's like that doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And you're just like, you're kind of like flailing or whatever. And some of the other methods, the toe training. Toe training, is it a solid method? Absolutely.
What is toe training?
Toe training is like getting somebody in front of you with a bungee cord.
Yeah, where they're pulling on you.
Hey, is it good? Yeah, it's good, but is it used in the right context, right? I can't get say, a NFL running back, right, and put him in front of a high school running back. Two different beasts, right? So he's at that point, he takes off, right, and the kid's being towed, right? The kid does, he does want to run faster, right? But if he's not able to withstand the speed that guy is forcing him to run, once again, what happens? You overstride, and it's not in a controlled environment.
And so talk to me about the incline then, because that sounds like maybe even more of like the staple, and you use that as like the progression to build certain attributes, certain qualities. Like what is it about that?
It's the whole thing. It's the building block, I feel, of increasing and developing speed on ground. Okay, so a couple factors with incline, right? Is the biggest argument I always get into with coaches is, okay, that's great. Yeah, we can go uphill outside and run up a hill. We know running uphill works. Okay, whether it's on the tread or whether it's outside, okay? But a couple factors is that come into play. We'll go to the high performance treadmill is what the incline does, okay? Average run on the incline within our protocols is say 25% incline, okay? Our average protocol incline is 25%, okay? Average speed is anywhere between 8 to 10 miles per hour. Here's the thing about an incline, okay, is when your body is running at incline, okay, let's just say whether it's 8% or 30%, okay? Your body detects that incline, okay? So what happens is we'll start with foot contact. As your foot hits the belt, okay, your body has to put force into the belt. Whether the belt's moving or not, you still have to put force into the treadmill. We know that, ground force reaction, okay? So we'll take it from, toe, ground contact to flight, all right, to ground contact again, okay? So we say, okay, foot hits the belt, okay? Okay, the body detects that incline, all right? So what the belt does is your foot hits the belt, right? As you power through, right, that belt will pull you through to an extent. It's not like you're being yanked, right? Your body's still able to detect that. Your body detects the incline, okay? So it hits, right? As you're pulling through, now we go into what we call triple extension, okay? Hip extension, knee extension, plantar flexion, okay? What that does is that causes a stretch on the anterior portion, okay, of the lower of the leg, right? Stretch on the quad, okay? And the cool thing about it, right, then you get stretch on the anterior tibialis. And how many times do you ever hear anybody talk about the anterior tibialis? Okay, so now you put a stretch in the anterior tibialis. So now, and even greater is the stretch of the hip flexor. Okay, how many times do you ever hear a coach say, "Oh yeah, we gotta get that hip flexor stretched," right? You don't, right? It's always quads, hamstrings, glutes. Okay, hip flexor is key, right? Anterior tibialis at the lower leg is key. Okay, so what happens is that your foot hits, it actually will pull you back into triple extension. Okay, this is where it gets cool. Okay, so now you got the stretch in the anterior portion. Okay, the body detects that stretch. Okay, the greater the stretch on any muscle, I don't care if it's, you know, your flexor hallucis longus, I don't care if it's your extensor digitorum, whatever it is, any muscle in the body is elastic in nature if you make it that way. So you get that stretch. Okay, your body detects that stretch. Over time, using the incline, the higher that incline goes, the greater that stretch will become in a controlled environment. That's where a lot of guys go wrong with overspeed, is if that stretch is too great, it'll kick on the Golgi organ tendon, right? And it causes a premature contraction. What happens when you cause a premature contraction in a muscle at a high rate of force? Boom. Okay, it turns on, boom, you pull a hamstring.
And you're down regulating rather
there it is.
Than taking advantage of that stretch reflex.
There it is, right? So now you shut the GTO off, now we manipulate the muscle spindles. Right, because we can detect the muscle spindles, right? It's literally a spring wrapped around the fiber. When you break it down microscopically, it looks like a spring, hence the muscle spindle. So right, we get that stretch right there, okay? Anterior side is stretched, right? The body detects that stretch. The greater the stretch on the muscle, the greater the what? Resulting contraction. Now we come into what we call the power, right? Everybody talks about triple extension, right? But nobody really hits triple flexion. What goes on in triple flexion, okay? Key, dorsiflexion, okay? Big toe, dorsiflexion, knee flexion, and importantly, hip flexion, okay? And in turn, what happens on the posterior side, okay, as that knee comes up into a higher, okay, range of motion, now you got stretch on the hamstring, okay? And even greater, now you have stretch on the gastrosoleus complex, and you have stretch on the hallucis longus, right? You ever hear anybody say, "Oh man, we got to stretch that hallucis longus"? You don't ever, okay? But the cool thing about the incline is the body already knows, right? The body knows way more than we do, right? We just screwed up by doing stupid things, right? The cool thing about it is that body pushes it into extension, then we come into triple flexion, right? The power position is what I always call it, right? Because rarely do we ever work triple flexion, okay? The tread is beautiful at triple flexion. The cool thing about the incline too is it forces dorsal flexion.
Okay, because of the angle a little bit more of the
That's
stretch.
right. Yeah, it goes back to the stretch, right? So boom, you're here, right? Then you're into right triple extension, and you're placing that stretch on that anterior tibialis on the front side of that foot, okay, or the lower leg, and then automatically we get this position right here, okay, dorsal flexion, right? The greater the movement, okay, the greater dorsal flexion at the big toe and at the ankle, okay, you're going to get greater range of motion up the chain, okay? The greater the stretch on the gastrosoleus, the greater the stretch on the hallucis longus, the greater the stretch on the hamstring, the greater the stretch on the glute, what happens? Your return is more power into the ground force reaction. And you do that over and over at different inclines using different holds, okay, over a 8-week period. Then you bring the incline down. Automatically now you have this and this and this. And when your foot hits at 22 miles an hour and you're pushed back this way, now your body understands what that stretch is. And so what happens? Greater the stretch, greater the contraction. Greater the stretch, greater contraction. Greater the stretch, greater contraction. You do it over and over and over a periodized 8-week approach. Are they going to get faster on the ground? Absolutely.
And that's interesting because I like the idea of putting them in an environment where it forces them to do that reflexively, as opposed to like the track coach mentality of knees, of like just cueing them into these positions. Of if you just like put them in an environment where they have to do this repeatedly, then when you drop the incline down, all of a sudden they do it naturally.
It's automatic
as well, but like it's something that becomes more ingrained.
That's right. And you talk about cueing, right? Is yeah, you can get a, you know, and I talk this to the track coach all the time. What we can do for the athlete in a 2-week period, maybe even a 1-week period on the treadmill, takes a track coach, right, 8 to 10 weeks. If it's a lower level athlete, right? Why? Because here's another cool caveat, right, with the tread, right, is it's a very controlled environment. At any point in time, it's a one-on-one, okay, speed session, right? I'm standing next to the tread. I tell the athlete, okay, hop up. You have 10 seconds, okay? So then the cool thing is the athlete knows that. And then if you'll notice on the treads, right, there's a mirror in front of that treadmill, okay? And then we get into what we call kinesthetic awareness. It's what the body can see and feel at the same time, okay? Your body will pick it up faster. So here's the key, right, is they're running, right? So they're at 25% incline, 10 miles an hour. Ready, go, right? I'm standing there. He's running. He sees himself in the mirror, okay? He's getting that feedback of seeing himself. Then he hears me tell him what to do, okay? Higher knees, right? Get your knees up, right? More dorsal flexion. Don't plantar flex so much, right? Arm drive. Get your arm in this position. Whatever it is I'm cueing him or her to do at that point in time, they see it in the mirror. They hear me. They feel it, right? And so they've got the ocular motor, the vestibular, and they're hearing and feeling at the same time, right? Then you get kinesthetic awareness. And they pick it up a lot faster, as opposed to saying, okay, all right, Zach, I want you to run. Okay, ready, go. All right, we'll film you. All right, ready, go. All right, you're running down the track. All right, come back. All right, you know, you need to do A, B, C, and D. And you're like, oh, okay, all right. Then you focus on A, B, C, or D, right? Well, if you can't feel or see yourself doing it, all right, you over repetition, you may get it, right? But if I can tell you exactly what to do and how to do it, and you can see yourself doing it at the same time, right?
Much more instant feedback.
You get instant feedback, right? And that instant feedback, right? That's why I tell coaches, okay, you don't like the tread, all right? That's fine if you don't like the tread, right? But I'm telling you right now, I can take an athlete, right, and do what it's going to take you 8 to 10 weeks to do in 1 to 2 weeks.
I do like that idea too. Like you said, being able to be very precise in the exact inclines we're doing, the exact speeds we're working at. There is a much greater element of control compared to going out and just finding a hill that the hill is what it is and stuff like that.
Sure.
You don't get to control any of those variables.
There's no control in those variables. And do I think running up a hill outside is great? Absolutely, right?
Not that we have many of those in Florida.
Do you have many of those in Florida, right?
Yeah.
What if you're in Alaska, right? Can you go outside in November, December in Alaska and run outside? No, you'll freeze your ass off, right? So you have to have some kind of controlled environment. So you limit yourself to what you're trying to do. And running up a hill outside is great, okay? Here's another factor, which a lot of people don't think about when it comes to the tread, right? It's all about neural drive. How can we tell the brain to tell the muscles to fire at a higher rate of force over and over and over and over again, okay? Here's the cool, if I say I want you to get on the treadmill and run at 30% incline at 8 miles an hour, and I want you to do it for 15 seconds, you have two options. Either you do it, okay, or you don't, okay? This is the argument I get into coaches, and I've gotten into a lot of arguments with coaches about it, right? I'm like, all right, coach, cool. All right, let's do outside running hills works, okay? Give me your 5 best, hard-hitting, toughest kids you can possibly get. I'm going to take them outside. We're going to find a hill that is 30% incline, okay? And we're going to do, say, 15 sprints, okay? And you're going to run up that hill for, say, 25 meters. They're going to run up as hard as they can. They're going to walk back down, okay? This is what's going to happen, all right? I don't care how tough you are. Once you get fatigued, okay, and I always say fatigue makes cowards of us all. Once you get fatigued and you're running up a hill and you're trying to technically do it for speed, okay, yeah, we know, all right, is it going to get you strong? Yes. Is it going to condition you a little bit? Yes. Right? Is it going to make you faster? To an extent, but not like it is on the tread, because if you go outside and I say, all right, I want you to run up that hill 25 meters and we're going to do it 15 times, right? By the 5th to 6th set, right, the body gets fatigued. As soon as the body gets fatigued and they're running up a hill outside, 2 things happen. Their frequency, okay, stride frequency decreases, and their stride length decreases. You decrease frequency, you decrease length, you decrease ground force reaction, which is the whole point for speed. Okay, how can you make somebody faster? You got to teach them to put more force into the ground through strength, through speed, and through power.
So you're saying there's less fatigue on the treadmills in here?
There's fatigue on the treadmill, right? But the cool thing about it is, because it's a controlled environment, if I ask them to run for...
So at this point, our interview actually got interrupted. The tech was not working. It took us a couple minutes to catch it. So there's a little bit of a blank space in there. But we were able to get that, restart that. The second half is on Zoom, so it's not quite as clear, the audio or the video. So bear with us. Hope it's still worth listening to and valuable. And here is part 2. That's all right. All right, so we'll kind of just jump back in, see how much we got. But basically, like that neural drive, like that max output idea, something that we were just talking about that I do think is very, very, very effective, something that nobody really touches on very frequently. People don't get into that max output, that longer duration. Like a lot of sprints are so short, they never even touch top speed.
They don't. No.
So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on like how that affects performance and things like that.
So if we go back to, we're talking about neural drive, and you're talking about neural drive, nobody really reaches top speed. I mean, some athletes are capable of doing it, but you got to teach them to get to that point, right? And that goes back to neural drive. But the cool thing about neural drive, and you talk to coaches, is if you can tap into a certain parameter within the nervous system itself, right? Neural output. You can take a slow kid and make him fast. You can take a fast guy and make him even faster. You can take a 4 or 5 guy and get him to a 4 4 4 3. Right? We know that for a fact. But the cool thing too is what coaches love as well, is coaches love getting into those racks. They love getting into the racks and getting up under the bars, they call it, right? And I completely agree with that. But if you can increase neural output by using the tread and then put them into the racks, and their neural output is greater, their neural output is going to be greater within the strength parameters. They'll squat more. Goes back to say dorsal flexion. If you can increase dorsal flexion by using the incline on the tread, and you increase dorsal flexion under the rack, you're going to squat more. Why? Because you have greater range of motion and greater stability at the hip, because you have more range of motion at the ankle.
And I mean, you talked about like way back when you were talking about like being able to recognize a Division I athlete like at a young age. Like probably one of those biggest differences is just that nervous system, like what they can output.
That's
like,
it.
And some of them just have it naturally, but being able to build that quality in from wherever it is to maybe what they can get to is going to be one of the biggest things that I think can improve.
That's exactly right. And
to produce anything.
Without a doubt, and sport in general. What is sport? It doesn't matter. I would say this: it doesn't matter if you're a basketball player, a football player, a baseball player, a shot putter, what sport? Ice skating, right? Figure skating. I was
going to say ice hockey.
You know what I'm saying? Hockey. Well, a lot of the stuff I developed was from hockey players, right? Hockey players are just sprinters on the ice, amazing athletes. But what's the one thing that everybody has in common is they're all athletes, and they all have to have some kind of power output. Okay. I could take a baseball pitcher, I could take a shot putter, and I could take a 100 meter runner and run them through the same system and the same protocols on the treadmill and not do anything else, right? And we've proved this with baseball players. We've got a group up in North Carolina that's proved it by just getting a kid out of the cages from throwing the ball, right, and putting him on the treadmill and going through a progression, right, of quote unquote neural development, right, say 8 weeks, and they don't throw for 8 weeks, all right, or they don't throw the shot put for 8 weeks, okay, or they don't sprint for 8 weeks, and we get them into the rack, or we get them into the cage, or we get them onto the ice, whatever it may be, their output is greater. Why? Because we're forcing the body to go above and beyond their perceived levels of exertion and ability. Why? Because if I ask an athlete to run once again at incline at 11 miles an hour for 8 to 10 seconds, they have to do it. And we do it over and over and over and over again, right? Not only does their nervous system, right, enhance, their neural drive, of course, enhances, their anaerobic capacity enhances. Why? Because if I can take somebody from 120 beats per minute to 180 in an 8-second span, and we do it over and over and over, not only are they better conditioned, not only are we getting them to move better, right? We're getting them into the racks and they're stronger. Their velocity on the ball is greater. Their velocity on the spin is greater. Their velocity coming around the corner is greater. Whatever it may be, everything is greater. Why? Because we taught the brain to fire the muscles at a higher rate of force, okay, with greater consistency.
That is very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense if you just, without even getting into the sport specific activity, if you can just dial up the output that we can produce from here, that without training it, they can go back and perform at a higher level, and whatever sport it is that they're trying to do, they can go and replicate that.
And we know that for a fact. And science is proving it right now. We've got people doing the studies on it. We're working with groups that are going to be able to analyze motion. Right? You analyze motion and then you study it. We know for a fact that it works, right? And it's more effective, right, than getting, because everybody wants speed, right? But really nobody knows how to train speed. It's all right. everybody line up, all right, and or do cone drills or do agility ladders, whatever speed is, right? I'm not saying any of that is bad, right? But is it really giving them the neural output that they're really capable of getting, right? Because the body's capable of amazing things, right? We just have to override certain parameters to do that. So traditional speed is, all right, let's go outside and we're gonna do what? Sprints, right? Well, if you're slow, right, and you don't know how to get any faster, you're just gonna run, right, as fast as you or hard as you can. But once fatigue sets in, what do? You slow down. Why? Frequency decreases, length decreases. Okay. The fast guys stay fast, the moderate guys stay moderate, slow guys stay slow. Okay. But you can switch that, right, by enhancing neural drive. You can take a slow guy, make him faster, make the moderate guy even faster, and take the fastest guys and make them even faster.
And so within that neural drive concept, then can you see carryover and improvements in things like first step and things like change of direction?
Without a doubt.
Even by spending, I know you guys do so much of that stuff.
You have to, yeah. We are big into ground based. I call it transference, right? You're taking the body to school on the tread, right? You're teaching the brain to fire the muscles at a high rate of force, right? But just like school, right, is you get a knowledge, but just like you were saying, you didn't get your knowledge until you came and you did some kind of experience outside of school, right? It's the same thing for the human body. We're going to take them to task on the tread, teach their brain, right, to teach their nervous system to fire at a high rate of force. You put them on the field, right? There's a transference phase. I always say 1 to 2 weeks, but their body's like, oh, I can go faster. I know what's going on now, right? Okay, instead of running in a straight line, right, I'm going to be able to stop, plant, and cut, right? Because now the way we train, right, is now I'm strong here, I have more range of motion at my ankle. I have more range of motion at my big toe, which means I can put more force, right, over my knee, which in turn gives me more stability to the hip, which in turn causes more power in the ground. I'm stable, I'm strong, boom. Am I more agile? Am I more power in the ground? Absolutely, in any direction.
Got it. So it's almost like capacity and then like application.
There it is. That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
Right?
So then would you say, like, if we look at performance and like output as like a combination of, we've got kind of like the neurological piece, the neural drive, we've got like the physical structural, like what are the tissues capable of, like muscular force and things like that, and then even biomechanics, state patterns, like those three things are all kind of interacting to perform or to give us like our high speed output and that sort of thing. Like, of the three of those, I'm sure different athletes maybe need more or less of some, but like, is it the neural drive output that you see contributes the most to that performance?
Without a doubt, it's the neural drive. And it goes back to the racks, right? Everybody wants to get under the bar, right? Everybody wants to be bigger, stronger, right? But if you can increase neural drive, you're going to get in the racks and you're going to be stronger on your squat. You get stronger on your squat, we know it translates over to more power into the field. Okay. You can get stronger on your cleans. Okay. What is a clean? Clean is just being able to lift the bar from the ground up at a high rate of force, right? Velocity. That's where kind of the industry is starting to change. They're realizing, holy shit, if I can move that bar at a higher rate of force, not so slow, it's different for power lifters. It's different for bodybuilders. It's different for strongmen, right? They just want to pick up as much weight as they possibly can. It doesn't matter how fast it comes up, right? Just as long as it gets up off the ground, right? You're going to set that record. But for athletes, it's different. What is sport? Sport is chaotic. No matter if you're a figure skater, you're a baseball pitcher, you're a whatever sport you may be, right? You have to have power, but you have to be able to increase the velocity of a jump in a figure skating jump, the velocity of a baseball, the velocity of your bat, the velocity of throwing a football, the velocity in being able to stop, cut, and move if you're a running back, right? Velocity to be able to come out of the blocks and accelerate. Okay? All that is based on neural drive, and we're starting to understand that's where velocity-based training is coming, VBT, right? That's huge in the industry now, but still people aren't picking up on it, right? If I can get a big, strong kid to pick up 225 pounds in a clean as fast as they can off the ground, but you got to teach them to do that. So how are they doing it? Now they're getting visual cues, right? Now you've got these things like the perch, right? Being able to, the Tendo units, being able to measure velocity of the bar. Why do you want to measure velocity of the bar? Well, if a kid is standing there, right, and you have to get a certain speed of that bar up off the ground, right, but you don't know what you're doing, right, you may feel like, oh yeah, that had to be in the green. Well, it wasn't in the green according to what we just read. Okay, you've got to get in the green. How do you do that? Okay, you got to put more force, but you got to teach the brain, to teach the muscles to fire at that rate of force. So when you do pick up something and you have something in front of you, you can see it, right, and you are in the green with some of these technologies, and you see that bar is moving at the speed we're asking you to move it, okay, and you do it over and over and over, whether you're running, sprinting, whatever it may be, and you know you're getting at a higher rate of velocity-based training, Is your neural drive and output going to be greater on the field? Without a doubt.
That's interesting. To like the neural drive side of things, is
everything
that you would say is like contributes the most, and probably if you look around at just the industry in general, is probably the least trained, so like the least developed in most athletes and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting, the kind of the gap there, like you said.
To this day, right? Everybody, what do they say? Speed kills, speed kills, speed kills, right? But who's really training speed, right? TCU this past year made huge headway in the football world, right? Because TCU really shouldn't have been technically, quote unquote, in the national championship, but they were. Why? They trained speed 3 to 4 times per week. It's not get in the racks and just get heavy, right? Let's get it out on the field and let's train speed, right? They got faster on the field. Their slow guys got fast, right? Their moderate guys got faster, and their fastest guys got even faster. That made them a very effective team. And then mindset is starting to change with lots of coaches within the strength industry. It's like, okay, speed does make a difference, because when you're on a field, right, you can make slow guys fast, and they're 325 pounds, and you make them fast. And you see some of these guys now that are running sub 5s, and they're 300 plus pounds, dude. I mean, are you kidding me? Why? We're finally tapping into that neural drive that we've been talking about. And and I always say that the treadmill is specifically designed for that. Not the speed of the belt, the incline, because the incline forces these guys to get into proper movement patterns. You get into the proper movement patterns, their performance increases and their skill increases, and the neural drive just goes up the chain, right? Most coaches are like, skill, right? Baseball is a perfect example. They don't give a shit how a kid's moving, right? Let's go out and we're going to play a baseball. Throw. Okay, skill. Well, if you do that over and over, right? Okay, what happens? The rate of injury goes up now in the industry for baseball players. Kids getting Tommy John at 12, 13. Why? If he doesn't know how to throw a baseball at velocity, right, and he's not strong enough to throw a baseball at velocity, what's going to happen? Of course, his arm's going to go out.
And so with the incline, we've touched on it some, but what is maybe some of the differences? Because now, like, the curved treadmills, woodways are very popular now and stuff.
The curves,
yeah,
it's I call them a one-trick pony. Okay, does it put you into a good biomechanical pattern? Yes, right. So if I have an athlete that gets on the curve, and I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's an effective tool, right? But is it an periodized approach? Okay, so if you get on, right, and I get on, I can top out at 17 miles per hour. You can top out at 20 miles per hour. How am I going to get to 20 miles per hour? How are you going to get to 22 miles per hour? Is it going to put you in the right running mechanics properly? Yeah, that's what it's designed for, right? It increases what? Extension, and it increases flexion because of that's why what's cool about the curve, right, is it's causing what? Dorsal flexion. Okay, but if you top out at 20 miles per hour, okay, and you can't go any faster, is it going to help you? No. There's got to be another way. So that's where the incline comes into play. That's where the motor comes into play. I'm not saying non-motorized is wrong. We do non-motorized quite a bit within the system, right? But if I want an athlete to go from 17 to 19, we can't do it on a curve.
Almost more of like an assessment evaluation tool than a training
exactly
tool. See where
if you do it over and over, right, is it going to condition you? Absolutely, it's going to condition you, right? But once again, it was the neural drive. If I don't know how to run over 17 miles an hour, okay, I'm not going to run over 17 miles an hour until I figure out how I'm going to do it. Well, how do you figure out how to do it? You've got to teach the nervous system to fire at a higher rate of force. Does the curve do that? No. Does it put you in the right movement mechanics? Yes. Okay.
Got it. Then you touched on with TCU, the application of that, in a team setting, but then also more of like an in-season versus off-season. Could maybe speak to that more of like what you do with your different athletes when they are in season, off-season. I know you work with a lot of teams.
It's so preseason, right? There's a lot of things preseason. You got to condition. Good. You got to condition, right? You got to get them faster. And you got to get them stronger. So there's that. But in season, right? They're playing so much, but still the one thing that we always touch on, right, when we bring our athletes in is hit speed, speed of movement. It has to be hit all the time, day in, day out, over and over and over again, right? To keep increasing that neural drive.
And I mean, that makes sense too, of like even an athlete that's in season is probably not going to touch a lot of those speeds. Even soccer players on the biggest field of anything, like rarely hit a true top speed.
Sure.
So even to give them, I like that idea of in season and in general, like giving athletes the opposite of what they get in their actual training environment. They're already, if anything, overtrained there. So what are the things that they're missing? And that being one of the big pieces.
Right. Well, soccer's, since you're a soccer guy, the cool thing with soccer is we had an opportunity to go over to I don't know if we're getting off topic, but I just think it's a cool story. Considering talking about soccer, we got a chance to go over to England, Dario and I, and work with Leicester City.
No way.
And like the European. Right?
Yeah.
So we're Dario and I aren't soccer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Just not soccer guys. We're Americans, right? We just don't, when you go over there, right? Soccer is everything.
Yeah.
So they call us up. They buy a tread. They call us up and like, hey, we've got one specific guy. They bought the tread for one specific guy. They've got gazillion dollars, so it doesn't matter, right? But they fly us over and they say, hey, we've got one guy. I can't remember who he was, but he was a very high level midfielder.
Got it.
Okay, very high level, and these guys get paid. When you get over there and you realize, I was like, holy smokes, I didn't realize, right, what European soccer is, right? So they bring us over and they say, all right, we've got a guy. He's not doing what we need him to do, basically, right? We're paying him an exorbitant. I think they were paying the guy like 20 million, right? But he's not making the 90th minute, right? And on film, we think his mechanics just aren't where they need to be. We need him to get to 90 minutes, right? But he's only making 80 minutes. How can we get this figured out? And he said, they go, we've been working on the pitch, right? They call it the pitch. We've been working on the pitch with him. What we need to do is up his intensity, decrease his volume, because we got to decrease his volume because he's got, 2 high-level soccer matches per week, but he's just not getting where we need him to do. Is there something we can do using the treads? And so I sit there with Dario and I'm like, bro, I don't know. So I go back and I say, okay, soccer, he's got to make 90 minutes. All right. So let's not change once again, incline. Okay. Because I know incline does what we've been talking about. Incline is going to force him to get into a parameter and a biomechanical efficiency that he needs to get into that they weren't able to get out on the pitch, right? Why? Because they're telling him, you got to move faster. You got to go faster. You got to do this. You got to do A, B, C, and D. Well, it doesn't matter how many times, even a high level guy, if you tell him you need more dorsal flexion, you need more of this, you need more of that, blah, blah, blah. If he doesn't know or see what he's doing, then he's not going to get it, right? So I said, all right, let's do this. I said, we're going to do, because our levels are level 1, we have level 2, level 3, and we have a 4th level. And within those levels, right, it's 3 times per week per week, right? So there's 3 sessions per week. So I said, all right, that's what we're going to do. And we're in the back and I'm talking, because I'm like, I can't say, I really don't know what to do, right? But all right, this is what we're going to do. I said, all right, we're going to do level 1, day 1, week 1, session 1, right? And I was like, well, this guy's a high level dude, right? We got to get him to, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I said, we're going to do what we do with our 14-year-old athletes with this high level guy. The only thing I'm going to change is the speed and the time. They need him to increase his, basically his aerobic capacity to get him to 90 minutes. And second, we've got to fix this guy's mechanics. So we looked at him, right? And I was watching the video, right? And in my mind, I'm like, this guy runs just like a chicken, right? Soccer players like staying.
We're notorious.
Soccer players like staying in tight, man. They're like, right, right?
Yeah.
Well, we got to get this guy to 90 minutes, right? And he's got to do it at a high level. They say he runs anywhere between like 10 and 12 miles per game. I'm like, holy shit, right? Now I'm like, what are we really gonna do with this guy? So, and I got the video footage of him running, but so they're like, okay, we need to up his intensity and decrease his volume. That was my other thought. I was like, yeah, I cannot screw this up, right? And so I say, okay, let's do day 1, week 1, session 1. Instead of a 25% incline at 10 seconds and 10 miles per hour, we're gonna run him at 25% incline, okay, 8 miles an hour for 15 to 20 seconds. Right, enhances aerobic capacity. So we start on this guy and he gets on the tread. I'm standing next to him and I'm cueing him. Right, we've got the mirror in front of him. He's seeing, right? He's feeling, he's hearing. So all those things we talked about, that kinesthetic awareness, he begins to pick up. Right, his knee drive is good. His dorsal flexion is good. His arm drive now isn't short and choppy. Right, now we got him kind of opening up a little bit. Okay, and so they have the catapult put on him. Right, so they've got they're reading his miles per hour. They're reading his biomechanical efficiencies. They got him on the heart rate, right? They've got VO2 max. They got all this shit on it, right? And so we come back and they give us a chart, right? He goes through the full week 1, day 1, session 1, right? Of the protocols. It's just once again, I tweak the incline, change that, right? And so get him off. And so we're talking about volume. Okay. Here's another cool thing about the tread is it decreases volume and the amount of pressure that's on an athlete from a volume standpoint. So within he ran a total of 4.5 5, 6, 7. They had everything, data wise. I was like, well, he ran 5 minutes, right? They just put it for fucking 5 minutes, right? He ran 5 minutes, total for 5 minutes, right? His physiological parameters based on his heart rate and getting into the anaerobic threshold is where he needed to get to within 5 minutes. We were able to duplicate what they were seeing with this guy in an 80-minute high-level European soccer match.
Wow.
And I did it in 5 minutes.
In one session.
In one session. And when you see the video, right, he begins to open up his stride. His knee drive is great. His arm drive is great. He's not choppy, right? So did we decrease his volume up? Yeah, absolutely. Did we up his intensity? Absolutely, right? Because his heart rate keeps going up and up and up and up. The cool thing about it is I can correct his mechanics. And I did it in one session where it took, we're talking high level, what they call physios, right? And in a 2-week period, they couldn't correct them, right? Why? Because they weren't able to teach him, right? Once again, right? They were telling him what to do. He just wasn't picking it up. Why? Because he couldn't see himself do it. He wasn't feeling it. That's cool. Once again about the tread.
Neural drive.
That's it, man. Yeah. Right.
That get the carryover.
Yeah.
And do something slow and in the weight room, but then actually hitting that to translate to when you're doing stuff at max output on the field.
That's exactly right. As opposed to getting, so I can get 5 guys, 5 to 7 guys on the tread, and they're running at 6-second bursts of speed, right? Go, stop. Go, stop. Rest, work, rest. Rest, work, rest. Over. What is sport, right? Rest, work, rest. Right? Go, stop. Go, stop. For how long? Average playing football, 6 seconds. Average playing baseball, right? 6 seconds. Average play in volleyball, 6 seconds. Everything's within that 6 to 12-second parameter, right? Unless you get into cross country, that changes right parameters. Okay. But everything is that rest to work ratio. Go, stop. But how effective is it? Right? You can do that outside, right? But if you're outside in the heat, right? And you're going to go out and say, I need you to do X amount of sprints over and over again, right? Fatigue is going to set in. Do they get fatigue on the tread? Yes. But every time they step on the tread, I'm capable of telling them what to do and how to do it. They have the mirror in front of them. They hear me. They see me. They feel right. Their knee drive is greater. Their dorsal flexion is greater. Talk about the great toe. I know that you work a lot with the big toe. You work a lot with dorsal flexion, right? How many times do people do that? They don't. Right? But if you can, like I said, if you can increase flexion and extension, basically dorsal flexion, plantar flexion at the big toe and the ankle, right? Your knee's going to be stronger. Your hips are going to be more stable. You can get strong in the racks because you can get more depth in the racks, all right? And you can put more power. Why? Because you have that elastic nature that we've been talking about.
And so it's interesting too with you keep comparing the inside to the outside. You can almost get some of that auto regulation essentially, with everything in here, because when you reach a certain drop off, you literally just can't perform.
You just can't perform, right? You're fatigued, you're tired. You don't want to do it.
Reps with decreased intensity, decreased quality, and that sort of thing. Because you keep touching on the mobility of the toes and the ankles and stuff like that. Is that something that's I'm sure you guys do some direct work on, but almost the incline itself can create some of that mobility and some of the adaptations?
It forces it, right? We do mobility work where we'll get them into a position where, right, okay, we'll do, right, just want you to force that knee over that toe. Okay, put them on the slant boards, right? Force that knee over that toe. Do it barefoot, right? Take your shoes off and do it barefoot. Why? Because if you have some kind of sole underneath that's taking that cushion, right, your big toe doesn't function like it needs to. The cool thing about the incline that goes back, right, is as soon as that foot hits, okay, it causes a great stretch on that gastroc-soleus complex.
Which again, just at max neural output, you get just such a greater adaptation.
That's it. And over time, using the incline, once again, right, you increase what? Okay, dorsal flexion at the ankle, but even greater dorsal flexion at the big toe.
That's amazing.
The big toe is a huge function, right? Nobody ever thinks. You ever hear a strength coach? All right, boys, we're working big toes today.
Yeah.
Right?
No toe days in the gym.
No toe days in the gym, right? There's no toe days in the gym, right? You got quads, baby, hamstrings. We got to get that ass strong, right? But if you can get more stability and quote unquote mobility too at the ankle and the big toe, it goes right up the chain, right? And if you go up the chain and everything is stable from up, right, you're going to get more power in the racks. You're going to move the bar with greater velocity, which is where the industry is going, right? It really is. The industry is going. Okay. Yeah. Everybody loves to sometimes get under the bar and pick up a big heavy bar, right? Kind of empowering, right? But when you do a power clean, you do it for reps and you do it for speed, right? It's going to translate onto the field, right? And speed kills on the field.
Yeah, 100%. How many times do you see the best athlete on the field is rarely the best athlete in the gym? So clearly we're missing something.
That's exactly right, dude.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Well, amazing, dude. Thank you so much for kind of having me out, like taking the time to sit down and have the conversation. Definitely looking forward. I feel like we could do this for a much.
We can do a longer time. I think we can go for 3 hours, man. We didn't even get into going backwards, right?
No,
We do a lot of lateral and backward stuff on the tread, and I know the knees over toes. You guys are big on that, the retro side of things.
100%.
Why do we go backwards? Well, I mean, we move. Technically, we don't necessarily move backwards, right? But it's a whole different biomotor pattern than moving forward, right? But remember, your body works in 360 degrees planes of motion, right? Rarely do we ever work in those planes of motion in the weight room. The weight room, it's always sagittal plane, right?
Yeah.
Always getting things right in front of your body, right? Clean, squat, dead, bench, pull-ups, push-ups, whatever it is, all right. But sometimes we in sport, right? Sport is chaotic. You got to be able to move forward, sideways, backwards, right? Rarely do we ever move backwards.
Yeah.
No, and once again, we go backwards on the tread, right? And we go back to dorsal flexion and dorsal flexion at the big toe in a retrograde position on the treadmill. Once again, it forces that, right? Or maybe we even go lateral. Why do we go sideways on the treadmill? That's, we can talk about that. And then we can do what we call the subsystem, right? Lateral subsystem, right? Going on the posterior oblique subsystem, the anterior oblique subsystem, right? The lateral subsystem, right? There's all these subsystems. Your body works in tandem, right to left, left to right, up, down, side, 360 degrees. You don't train it that way. What happens? You increase your injury rate.
No, we'll definitely have to run this back, make sure the tech's working next time. Yeah, I think we could definitely do something.
Absolutely, dude.
So yeah, we'll definitely have to come back. Maybe you can come up to Orlando, and
I'd love to
get the opportunity to jump on these and try them out.
Yeah, you get to run with a pretty high quality athlete. So
yeah, we'll see if I can keep up.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Thank you very much for having me, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.